The famous Rashi that says that Yaakov left his parents' house and went to Haran, but stayed for 14 years in the yeshiva of Aver has many gaping holes in it. The first is, it wasn't Rashi altogether. It was actually of Gemara Megillah and also Medrash Seder Olam. And even the Gemara Megillah and Medrash Seder Olam have gaping holes in them as well. The Gemara bases on a brisa. The Gemara Megillah says Yaakov was by the house of Aver, Mutman, for 14 years. What does mutman mean? Mutman can mean hidden, but it also means covered and cloaked. So it does not mean that he was learning for 14 years. He's hidden. And since they use that word, the assumption is he was hiding from his brother. The Medrash Seder Olam says something very similar. They spent 14 years in Eretz Yisrael, hidden and serving Aver. So it adds on the fact that he also served Aver. That also could be a reference to him learning from Aver, but it also could be an apprenticeship with Aver. Again, what he was doing at Aver is not really as important as how do we learn that there are 14 years missing. This is where the Gemara and Seder Olam both learn this out from. The Pasuk says, right after the brachos were given and Yaakov was instructed to go to Haran, that Esav went to Yishmael to get a wife. The assumption is it took place immediately after the brachos and the instructions to go to Haran. It says he went to Yishmael and he took Machalas, who was sister of Nevoyos. The Gemara says it's obvious that she was a sister of Nevoyos. It says it that Yishmael must have died, and it had to be that Nevoyos had to give her away. Yishmael was 14 years older than Yitzchak. Yishmael died at 137 years old. Yitzchak then was 123 when Yishmael died. Yitzchak had Yaakov when he was 60. Therefore, Yaakov had to be 63 at the time that Yishmael died, at the time of the brachos, at the time that Esav took Machlas as a wife. Yet, Yaakov arrived at Lavan when he was 77, and here are those calculations. Yosef was born 6 years prior to Yaakov leaving Lavan's house. Yosef was 39 when Yaakov was 130 when they met in Egypt. Thus, Yaakov left Lavan's house 14 years prior to Yosef being born, or 53 years prior to them meeting in Egypt. 130 minus 53 is 77. So far, it all works out. Here's the problem. Number one, the Torah is not always in order. In fact, at the end of Perek Chav Hey, it says that Yishmael died, and then Parakim Chav Vav through Chav Ches go through Yaakov and Esav's life. Clearly, they were not born after Yishmael died. Therefore, this pasuk about Esav going to Yishmael for a wife does not have to be after the brachos. It could have been well before the brachos. It also could have been many years after the brachos. The brachos could have happened much earlier, and then many years later, he went to Yishmael. Second, going to Yishmael is generally speaking. He went to Yishmael's camp or family. He went to go find a wife from the daughters of Yishmael. Not necessarily where Yishmael was living or whether he was alive. Further, Yishmael's family was spread out between Egypt and Assyria, as the pasuk says. So therefore, he went to Yishmael's family, but he went to get Machlas, and the closest relative was Nevoyos. Yishmael was somewhere very far away. Number three, even if it was right after the brachos, there were actually two brachos. The pasuk says, and Esav saw because Yitzchak blessed Yaakov, and he sent him to Padan Aram, take a wife from there, and he blessed him. And he commanded him, saying, do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. But which time was this? The first time when the brachos were given were over the lambs. Esav comes and does not get a bracha. Then Rivka sometime later finds out that Esav said in his heart that he wants to kill Yaakov after Yitzchak and Rivka pass away. Yitzchak fetches Yaakov and gives him another bracha. Kel Shakai should make you fertile and numerous, and the offsprings should be granted the blessings of Abraham. So when did Esav go to find a different wife? The pasuk says that Esav saw that Yaakov was blessed the second time. But then the pasuk says, with a vav, and Esav saw that the daughters of Canaan were bad in the eyes of Yitzchak. He already knew this after he married his first wife. The Torah said much earlier that the daughters of Canaan were a source of bitterness for Yitzchak and Rivka. Thus, it is unclear exactly when he went to Yishmael to get his wife. Here's the point. Even if Esav did take a wife immediately after he saw Yaakov left the Haran, how do we know the blessings were given upon Yishmael's death? In fact, why would they even been given upon Yishmael's death? Yitzchak would feel old only one of 3 times in his life, when he reached the age of his father, but that was 175, and he was not nearly 175 yet. When he reached the age of his mother, that was 127. That's a possibility, but that would only be 10 years between the brachos and Yaakov then arriving at Lavan. Or when he reached his brother's age of 137. More likely, it was when he reaches the age that his brother died at 137, that's when he gave the brachos. At that time, Yaakov was 77, and he goes to Haran when he's 77. There's no missing years. It could be the first brachos when Yitzchak was 123 and Yaakov was 63, because when Yishmael died, Yitzchak felt like, now that I'm the sole surviving son from Avram and Sarah, he gives the bracha. Then, 14 years later, Rivka finds out about the plan to kill Yaakov, and Yitzchak again blesses Yaakov and sends him to Padan Aram. Again, those 14 years were before. It is more likely that Yaakov went directly because he was honoring his parents. Plus, there is additional reason why it makes sense there's a gap between the first brachas and the second brachas. The calculation of the Gemara Megillah is fine until it comes to Perek Lamed Beis. Because what does it say over there? Yaakov was returning from Lavan. He sent the message to Esav in Seir. When did Esav move to Seir? Esav took his wives, sons, daughters, and all members of his household, his cattle, his livestock, his property, and all that he accumulated in Canaan, and he went to another land because of his brother Yaakov, for their possessions were too great for them to dwell together. Yaakov, immediately coming back from Lavan, sends a message to Esav in Seir, which means he must have moved to Seir prior to Yaakov going to Haran. When did Yaakov accumulate all this wealth? The Torah says that these are the children he had from his Canaanite wives, meaning, so he moved to Seir before he went to Yishmael, before Yaakov went to Lef Haran, and before the second brachas. Yaakov received the first brachas to be bountiful, and that forced Esav out of Canaan to Seir. He could not have left immediately after the blessings, because he needed time to work and accumulate all the wealth. Then Yaakov was sent away to Haran. Therefore, he received the brachas at either 63, and the second brachas at 77, giving him 14 years to accumulate the wealth, or he received the brachas when Yitzchak reached 127, his mother's age, and that gave Yaakov 10 years to accumulate the wealth, and then he was sent to Haran. When Esav saw that Yitzchak gave voluntary second blessing to Yaakov and told him to get a wife from Lavan, while Esav had taken his wife from Yishmael in lieu of Canaan, Esav realized he made 2 mistakes. First, instead of going to Yishmael, he should have gone himself to Padan Aram. Second, Yitzchak voluntarily gave him the bracha that he will prosper and have the brachas of Avram. Now Esav saw he was powerless to kill Yaakov, because Yaakov may have stolen the first bracha, but definitely the second brachas were given voluntarily. Thus Esav had 20 years to forget his grudge, even if he still had the grudge. Because otherwise, A, why not look for Yaakov in Padan Aram? And B, he said to himself he would wait until the death of Yitzchak and Rivka, and yet he met Yaakov while they were still alive, and they made up. Therefore, the 14 years spending time in Aver had to be prior to all this, and it makes most sense that he was metumtum, he was wrapped up in being a shamish for Aver, learning about the importance of the land of Canaan, the birthright, the inheritance, and that is why the inheritance was so important to Yaakov,